Dear Excellencies, colleagues, dear participants, really happy and honored, and thank you, Tuan, for the invitation to the Boston Global Forum. The idea of the AIWS World Society is about setting principles to have a new social contract so that we can have pro-social AI systems that are good for society. And I think I'm here both to share some experiences that Taiwan had in the past decade about how exactly to do that, and also to illustrate some principles that are universally applicable so that we can design it in our political and social systems going forward. Now, 10 years ago, that was our first experience to encounter this massive societal effects of AI systems. That was not generative AI, but rather social media. There's this recommendation systems that makes things go viral, that polarizes the society and surface the most extreme voices from all the different camps in our society. I mean, not just Taiwan, really, but Taiwan was one of the most connected societies already 10 years ago, and therefore suffered the most from this new phenomenon back then. Indeed, by 2013, the trust level from our citizens to our democratically elected administration was at 9%, which did not improve in 2014. So the 9% was not very high. We're a society with 23 million people, and that means whatever the government says, 20 million people automatically said no to it, which makes it very difficult to govern. And also, the polarization level was at historic high. But we did not stop there. We invested in what's called pro-social AI to cure that polarization. We invented systems that, as the conversations goes on, it surfaces the voices that bridges the divide and balances the internal communities. And so by 2020 already, our trust level is back at over 70%. And so this dramatic increase started with a demonstration. So as you saw in the trailer, there was this 3-week conversation, thoroughly nonviolent occupy of the parliament. And we didn't call ourselves protesters. Protesters are against something. We're demonstrators. Demonstrators are for something new. So we're there to show, as the Parliament at the time were not able to deliberate a trade agreement with Beijing substantially. We then held the place and 500,000 people on the street, many more online. Anyone can join any of those civic assemblies, conversations around the occupied parliament. So some debated the effect of Huawei and ZTE on our then new 4G systems. Some people debated about human rights, about environmental rights, so on and so forth. But because there's a facilitated space with live streaming, every day we look at the balanced diversity of different ideas, as well as the rough consensus, the bridging ideas that brings people a little bit closer. And then we read it out to the plenary, to everybody online, and then the next day we start deliberating on something that is even more specific. The upshot is that after 3 weeks of nonviolent deliberation, we managed to agree on a set of very coherent demands that the Speaker of the Parliament at the time, Wang Jinping, eventually said, okay, let's just go with it, you won, right? So that is one of the very rare Occupy, thanks to these facilitative technologies that managed to converge instead of diverge. And so after this deliberation, at the end of 2014, all the mayoral candidates that are for open government civic participation got elected, sometimes surprising to even themselves. And all the mayoral candidates that did not have this as their platform lost the election. And so at the end of that year, we, the civic activists, were invited as reverse mentors, young advisors to the cabinet to develop this system so that people can have a similar demonstration online without the need to occupy the parliament for each controversial issue. We can mirror this dynamic with online AI systems. In 2015, we started deploying this kind of bridging system. This particular one is called Polis. We've tried many different iterations of it. In 2015, there's another AI system that are polarizing the societies around the world. It's called Uber. And it's basically saying that people without professional driver's license can, drive strangers on the way to work and charge them for it. And some people say that it's good because it's sharing economy. Some people say it's very bad because it's extractive gig economy or something. So this society, again, polarized. But instead of letting it fester on the antisocial corners of social media, meaning Facebook and Twitter, we built our own more pro-social media, invited people in. So as you can see, here is a statement from your fellow citizen that says, okay, so insurance is important. Now, maybe you agree, maybe you don't, but there's no reply button, so there's no room for trolls to grow. And as you click agree or disagree, your avatar, that blue circle, start to move toward the groups that agree with you on these matters. The area of the group is measured by the diversity, the plurality, not the head count. So even 5,000 people come here, vote exactly the same, it would not actually increase the group. So what it does is that it makes transparent what the social media companies are hiding from its users. Instead of the anti-social corner social media that does targeted advertisement using the social fabric but strip mines the social fabric because people are trapped in their isolated timelines, this makes us radically transparent what exactly are the gaps in our conversations. And we also said that we only hold ourselves to account to the ideas that cuts across all four groups. So only if you can propose something that all the different groups, including the minority groups, all agree. Otherwise, your idea will not set the agenda for our Uber conversation and lawmaking. And so this is an incentive to raise to the top, not to the bottom of the brainstem, so that people really thought very, very hard about what is the kind of statement that can cut across. For example, people would have nuanced ideas like surge pricing is fine, but undercutting existing meters is not. Or that if we offer Uber a license to operate in urban areas, so should the rural co-ops, and so on and so forth. And so these very diplomatic, nuanced ideas eventually came to the top after 3 weeks of online conversation, and you literally saw those groups converge to the middle. And so by representing fairly, balancing, and bringing across, bridging, the balancing and the bridging algorithms at the end of the day shows people this picture. And people can very easily then say, oh, actually the antisocial corner of social media led us astray because we devote all our calories on the 5 divisive statements and thought that there it is, and we extremify, the sounds from the other tribes. But actually, we do agree with most of our neighbors on most of things most of the time. It was just not reflected back to us because that was not good for selling advertisements or something. And so that is the part of the pro-social media that we bring to the table. And once people get exposed to this kind of picture, it just depolarizes the society on that particular topic. And research showed that when somebody engaged in a deliberation of this sort, for the next year or two on this topic, they cannot be polarized again. They cannot be mobilized on outrage or hate and so on. And so in a sense, this is a civic competence. It is not literacy in terms of individual to individual consuming of media. This is the competence exercising the civic muscles so that people become, again, a polity instead of divided. So in 2019, we installed in our curriculum, all the school children are now required, instead of literacy classes, taking competence classes so that they contribute to the fact-finding, they contribute to this kind of consensus making. It's not just limited to Taiwan, because our contributions are open source. So at the time, Twitter adopted the police algorithm into Birdwatch, now community notes. Maybe some of you have seen in some of the viral posts on x.com now, maybe from Elon, there is a notes that's very sticky. You cannot repost it without also carrying the notes. And the note actually surfaces important context so that you're not led astray by the absurd claims, right? By the parent note, by the parent post. But how does those community notes get selected? Again, exactly the same algorithm as the police algorithm. Anyone can contribute notes, but the algorithm shows maybe the wing on the left is a cluster, the wing on the right is the cluster, but only the notes that are broadly helpful, meaning if both groups that don't usually agree on one another's ideas, both happen to agree on something that's broadly helpful, do the notes get surfaced to the top because it is bridging. As we can see, X.com is a more polarized society than Taiwan. Instead of broadly helpful dominating, the left wing and the right wing actually dominates, but there is still some broadly helpful nodes. And now we're working on the idea of a super node, which is a language model, an AI, that takes the scattered dots on the top, the broadly helpful nodes, and writes something that describes the entire overtone window. And again, research shows that if people see this synthesized super nodes, again, it very much quickly depolarizes the society because people can see exactly where the overtone window are. And we're now working with Google Jigsaw to also deploy this technology to YouTube as well as other Google-based platforms. Now, to recap quickly, the core insight here is that instead of individuals receiving their own timelines and therefore polarizes people because we can't even share what is actually on our timeline, this idea of plurality, which is symbolized by this overlapping dotted squares, says that connection between individuals should be the first class objects. Once we discover that we form some groups, we can then surface a common experience to the group. And the common experience that cuts across groups, for example, for all the Taiwanese people, regardless of their party affiliation or ethnic or religion, winning the baseball together was kind of a shared experience. So if we share that experience, it automatically brings the groups closer because then we can refer to a shared peak experience that then describes the common ideas. And there's all sorts of ways of doing that. In the plurality book, which is freely available online, we look at the current ways. For example, across two people, there's intimacy, which is very high bandwidth, but very small amount of people. Conversation, which is maybe thousands of people using natural language. But once you hit like millions of people, tens of millions of people, you can only use voting, which is a vector, or capitalism, which is a scalar. So currently, there's this productivity frontier that makes us do a trade-off between the depth of conversation and the breadth of conversation. And the pro-social technologies that I just described is about pushing rightward and upward, using AI so that we can have the same depth of conversation but with more people, or with the same amount of people but deeper. And so I'm going to illustrate with some concrete examples because this can get very abstract. So President Macron, in his message, talked about deepfakes and how it led people astray from common facts into just individual opinions. In Taiwan, we also feel that threat very much. So this March, we started an alignment assembly, a citizens' assembly online to align AI systems so that the people doing deepfakes online can get some sort of pushback, and we want the social media platforms, the advertisement platforms, to assume liability if they let those deepfakes run rampant. But again, Taiwanese people don't like government censorship. So where exactly is the overtone window? That is the question. So we sent more than this is actually 200. Anyway, so we sent 200,000 SMS text messages to random numbers in Taiwan so that everybody has a roughly equal chance of receiving an SMS. Again, we asked them, how do you feel about information integrity, deepfakes online? And they let us know. But we also asked in that survey that would you like to attend an online citizens assembly for like half a day, almost a day of time, and talk it through with your fellow citizens on what is acceptable and measure? A lot of people sign up. And so we use stratified random sampling sortation to choose 450 people that we know are representative of the Taiwanese society in terms of gender, occupation, place they live, and so on. And then the 450 people gathered online in 45 rooms of 10 people each. So each person saw this 3 by 3 of other people, and they just talked. And the great thing about the online deliberation platform, which we partner with Stanford, was that there's no human facilitator. So instead of 45 human facilitator, it is an AI that captures the transcript in real time, that nudges the people who are quiet to speak up, that synthesizes the ideas present in the room and let people vote whether it's time to move on to the next topic. And also, in the same time, because the real-time transcript is produced, we can use AI, like the Supernote, to synthesize best idea from those 45 rooms into one coherent idea that can then be read back to the plenary or to the stakeholders. For example, one room may say, the deepfakes, like Elon Musk selling crypto scam, should get a digital signature from Elon Musk. Otherwise, it should be construed as fake by default. Maybe another room says if the social media platforms do this and somebody gets scammed for 1 million, they should be liable for that 1 million. We shouldn't just fine them because they'll just pay the fine. We should make them liable. Maybe another room says if they don't want to comply, maybe we can slow down the connection to Facebook. And maybe next room would say all this should be proportional, so we should only apply it to the platforms that reach more than 5% of Taiwanese population, so on and so forth. And so as the consensus start gathering, we can merge them, stitch them together, and find exactly which ideas are complementary to each other, are even bridging across longer distances. And then that was in March, and in April, we checked that with the stakeholders, the usual suspects. They all said, yeah, it's possible, it's just very expensive. So, okay, that's not a problem. And so the draft law was sent to the parliament in May, passed in July, and we just got the news that starting January 1st, this will take effect in Taiwan, the obligatory KYC for online scamming, deepfake. And so I think that is a really good example, saying that this crowdsourced ideas, the will of the people, is like a trade negotiation. You can negotiate much better if you can show the other party that this is actually the collective will of your society, that it will not get pushed back from the society. And in fact, there are now banks, financial institutions in Taiwan saying if Facebook or other platform, including TikTok, YouTube, and Line, do not implement this KYC method, then they're not going to buy advertisement from those social media anymore. They're going to boycott them. So again, this has a way to depolarize the society and also instill a sense of consensus. And that is how we can evaluate whether those ideas are good or not on an ongoing basis, like a continuous democracy. And then when that happens, we can evolve our governance with the same speed as the emerging technologies. It's not just used in Taiwan. The same technology, Polis and Talk to the City, are now being deployed by the Tokyo metropolitan government, Koike-san. Koike-san, when she ran for the third time, the governor election, she has a challenger, Takahiro Ano-san, who is 33 years old, an AI engineer. He was never into politics, but he read the Plurality book and had a video conference with me. And he's like, yeah, I don't have a platform, but I can crowdsource a platform. So what he did is that he asked people to hashtag Tokyo AI and suggest anything that the Tokyo platform can use. He has a VTuber avatar of himself that's streaming 24/7, and anyone can call his voice clone to have a conversation with Takahiro Ano. So this very, like he called it broad listening, the reverse of broadcasting, right? So this broad listening candidate crowdsourced a platform that is independently ranked as the best platform of all the people running for Tokyo governor. Koike-san was the second. But of course, he didn't win. But he did get the most votes for anyone under 40 years old for the Tokyo gubernatorial election. So when Koike-san won, and we had a conversation, she said she's very impressed with Ano-san, going to work with him. And so now Ano-san advises the Tokyo GovTech. And they are now, as we speak, doing a consultation for the future of Tokyo using exactly the same method. And so we're seeing that this method is generally applicable, not just for the elections phase, but also for the governing phase. Actually, the mayor here, Michelle, was the first to use the broad listening, just for the record, during her campaign period to listen from people in Boston, partnering this time with the MIT CCC. And MIT CCC is now also working with the counterpart, the Cortico nonprofit entrepreneurs. And Cortico systems take this idea, broad listening, but do it in the face-to-face setting. So that for each like school, for each like campus, for each maybe places of worship, for each places of journalism and so on, people can't just sit down and have a conversation on any topic with one of the participants' phone, but just recording this conversation. And now they have the research that can anonymize the conversation so that the nonverbal part, the prosody, gets retained, but you cannot identify back who said that. So it's good for highly controversial conversations about encampments, for example, and many other things. And so once this happens, again, using the broad listening techniques, they can do a sense-making, showing the different very diverse, polarized groups, what kind of utterances during those face-to-face conversations are resonating, both within the group, but also across the groups. And then they weave together using AI as a co-pilot, a medley, so that people can listen to that medley and know that people who we think are very polarized from us actually share some very basic feelings and basic facts. And again, there's research that shows that this really brings people together and has great peacemaking potential. And so now we're working with online social media, such as Blue Sky, to weave this into their algorithms, so that if you go to Blue Sky and go to one of those curated algorithmic feeds, you will see the kind of feed that brings the groups together instead of things that drive people apart. They will be transparent in showing that which communities are contributing to this feed. And maybe in the future, there's ways for people to commission, to sponsor the advertisement that create a sort of shared experience that would then heal the polarization very much present in the US society right now. So now we're working on this pro-social media algorithm with Blue Sky. But not just Blue Sky. Here in Boston, there's the civic entrepreneur, Frank McCourt, that is putting together a people's bid at thepeoplesbid.com that wants to basically buy TikTok before it's banned on the last day of the Biden administration. The hope is that we can turn TikTok into something like a, I don't know, free talk, we talk, something that is open, that is like Blue Sky, making sure that the creators on TikTok can take their creations and their followers into this decentralized Fediverse, this ecosystem, so that people can then curate a different view on TikTok instead of trapping people into the TikTok ecosystem where people do want to leave, but nobody wants to be the first to leave. They can migrate to something that is offering better pro-social algorithm without losing their content and social graph and relationships. So the Project Liberty Summit, which was just held in DC last week, talk about the concrete ways in doing that for TikTok, but also for MeWe, for Blue Sky, for all the newer generation of social media. So I think that is how we can turn something that is very much like a singularity of preferences. The more you use Twitter, the more your personality just converge to this particular kind of attention seeking into something that's more pro-social, more plurality, that is balancing within the community and bridging across communities. So I'd like to end on a personal note. In 2016, when I was first nominated digital minister, Taiwan did not have a digital minister. So the HR people from the cabinet asked me to write a job description of what digital minister means to the people. And in Taiwan, the Mandarin 数位 means both digital, but also plural, as in 不止一位, more than one, several, many. So I'm not just a digital minister, but also minister for plurality. And so I wrote a prayer, a poem, that is my job description. It goes like this. When we see the Internet of Things, let's make it an Internet of beings. When we see virtual reality, let's make it a shared reality. When we see machine learning, let's make it collaborative learning. When we see user experience, let's make it about human experience. And whenever we hear that a singularity is near, let us always remember the plurality is here. Thank you so much. All right. So we have, 40 minutes or so? Yeah, so that's plenty of time for conversations. So would anybody like to share some thoughts, reflections? Yes, please.
I'm a neurologist from the DC area, and I'm very intrigued by what you have done in Taiwan, and curious, how are you going to, or are you thinking about integrating AI into your medical system?
That's a great question. Is there a wireless cordless mic somewhere? Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, we have this crowdsourced attempt to ask all our public servants to think about how to integrate AI with medical systems this year. Every year we have a presidential hackathon, and the idea is that like 200 or so teams across Taiwan with at least one public servant, one private sector, and one civil society band together and find out how one emerging technology can be applied to one area. So every year there's a different theme, and the top 5 team winning the trophy, which was a microprojector. So if you turn it on, it projects the president giving you the trophy. It's self-describing. What it does is that it promises anything that you did on the local level becomes a kind of digital public infrastructure for the next fiscal year, so that we can get CapEx investments on some of the most important things, for example, from previous presidential hackathons, the telehealth. Sorry, I think I touched upon this. Can we open it up so that it's live stream? Sorry. Yes. So for the telehealth, for public key infrastructure that enable consent to be transmitted for telehealth, as well as for broadband as human right, and so on and so forth. And so I'm quite impressed by this year's presidential hackathon ideas about how AI can be used in healthcare. One particular exciting thing for me is the call to have a data fabric within our ministries, our different agencies, so that instead of the private data or the raw data being copied and therefore carrying all the cybersecurity problems, there's a public infrastructure plan for the next 3 years to build something like a workbench, so that people who want to do federated training, people who want to find out whether some algorithm works than others when it comes to predicting symptoms and so on, do not need to operate on the raw data by copying it or on a secure enclave or something, but rather can just work with synthetic data that retains the same usability as the raw data. It would also make sure that the newest technology like zero knowledge, multi-party computation, and so on, do not need to be individually implemented by different hospitals and different agencies and so on, and can provide a shared infrastructure, and also for people to give consent to participate in such studies without revealing their private information and so on. So I think we're now seeing a lot more focus on this kind of self-sovereign data dignity idea, but instead of against something, I love the phrasing, not protesting against surveillance, this is for something which is for selective disclosure, that is well-informed, that forms data coalitions that can intentionally create better AI models when it comes to predictions and so on. So I encourage you to look at a few examples, like there's datasports.tw that builds a data altruism organization out of all the gyms and exercise centers and so on, so that people can contribute together to enhance the sports science, for example, for baseballs, and also to advise people with different health conditions how to exercise better and so on. That is an ongoing project. Hope that answered your question. Thank you. So maybe here, sorry. Yeah.
I'm Carolina Rossini. I'm director for programs for public interest technology at AIWS. And what I actually was about to ask you, what is your concept for digital public infrastructure, because that has varied. So, but clearly it should be shared infrastructure. So I was curious, what are the core shared infrastructure you're building, and if you do have in Taiwan, as you have in other countries, like for zero region, right? Issues of inclusion, what are the issues you are grappling with? So that's one question. And the other question is, one of your slides, it struck me that and again, I haven't looked at this in detail, are there other or new filter bubbles being created by people moving around? So you are trying to depolarize, which thank you, but then are other filter bubbles being created because of this movement? So I was curious.
Excellent questions, which can easily take 3 hours for each. It's like seminar topic. I'll try to be brief. So recently, New America published this digital infrastructure piece, and Bess Novak and I co-wrote a piece on that, in which we argue for 2 points. One, that any DPI that's a public infrastructure should include a participation infrastructure. So it is not just building like highways and roads and train stations for the people, but rather with the people. Because the point of DPI is that we want interoperability. But what to interoperate? Only people closest to the pain know what to interoperate. So instead of the state doing this nitty-gritty micromanaging of what kind of on-ramp and off-ramp to connect to the infrastructure superhighway, we should instead adopt this idea of a public code, which is not just free software open source, but rather code that is rigorously tested in terms of cybersecurity, like SBOM and so on, and then people know that it's secure, it's trustworthy, and you can adapt it so that every metropolitan government, every city government can just start customizing it in a way that they want for the particular on-ramp and off-ramp to the DPI, and then the people who are using the system have some way, like the broad listening infrastructure and so on, to say, actually, we want it to work this way. We want like Taiwan has 16 indigenous nations. Each would have a different culture when it comes to AI assistants playing a mediator's role, and so on. So there should be easy ways for people to not just fork, but also provide merges, potential new components to the DPI. And so in Taiwan, we have code.gov.tw, which is the public code portal for this kind of collaboration. So this is point one. It needs to be with the people, not just for the people. And the second is that it needs to extend to pretty much all the essential services, regardless of which stack they're on. So people know, of course, that broadband is a human right, should be DPI. Nobody contests that. If you're of the UPI/ATAR inclination, people think identity should be part of the DPI. However, like in Taiwan, people also don't want their private transactions to be monitored by the state. So some sort of a decentralized wallet, zero-knowledge selective disclosure, that's also considered DPI in Taiwan. And actually, we've allocated CapEx for that as well, and working with the Web3 communities. And on top of that, payment interoperability. Sometimes thought of DPI, sometimes not. But again, if the people think it's for essential services, like for our universal broadband, we also include, for example, emergency medical services, as well as the VRS, the sign language translation, because sign language is part of the Taiwan's 20 national languages. That's also essential service. So once there's a listening session and we held deliberation asking people, do you think it's essential service? And as soon as somebody thinks it's essential service, we started crowdsourcing something like with presidential hackathon. And once a solution emerges, we then allocate infrastructure money on top of that. So not just the delivery should be participatory, the agenda setting should also be participatory. That's the second point. I'll stop here because I can really talk for 3 hours on this topic. The second one is the polarization. I'll be brief. So it's double hermeneutics, of course. Once we show people what groups are intersecting, what groups are being together, it starts dividing the original in-group, right? Because within any in-group, there is a bunch of people who want to cross that bridge. Right? On Blue Sky, I was just looking at this Swifties for Trump bridge, which is a real bridge, right? But there are people who want to cross the bridge and people who don't. So, of course, it creates new internal divisions, right? Which is why the bridging part and the balancing part need to be equally important when it comes to pro-social algorithms. We don't want a very, very long bridge toward some very dark corners of the internet that leaves most of the original in-groups behind. So already the police algorithm, the community nodes algorithm, the community post algorithm that I talk about takes both into account so that as you bridge, you can never lose that balance. There's a lot of algorithmic details, but we did consider that as well. Thank you. So I think Bruce had a hand first.
It's kind of both of us together. And we have the same question.
Uh-huh.
When we listen to you talk about your bridging systems and cohesion, we whisper to each other, we said, Taiwan's a homogeneous culture.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, to us, makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Then you just said Taiwan has 20 national languages. Yeah.
That's right. And 4 religions, none of which have a majority.
So
yeah.
I guess our question was originally, does homogeneity matter here?
Uh-huh.
Now it's, how homogeneous is Taiwan?
Not really, right? I mean, 10 years ago, we're at the brink of a cultural civil war, which is, of course, unheard of in the US. And there was the idea of, like, if you go to the rallies in the 2014 election, you have one side that, waves this national flag, and the other side doesn't even use that flag, doesn't even want to look at that flag, right? So this is like almost cultural civil war level polarization. This is now being being healed very quickly, first by President Tsai Ing-wen, but freshly by President William Lai, who is like very much in the middle path as we speak. But it did take 10 years to heal that particular divide. Not completely, but certainly on the right road. I think Sandy, maybe? Sorry, you have it first, sorry.
And the languages is still 20 languages?
Yeah, there's still 20 national languages, including sign language, and 16 indigenous languages. And the indigenous leaders keep reminding me that's 16 language groups. It's actually 42 languages, not dialects, which is important, which is why I say here. Yeah.
This is really important in our understanding now of
Mhm.
Taiwan case and the data you showed.
Mm-hmm.
We both believe, how many years, of course. How
Yeah.
many years?
Yeah, no, and I think that's also what we got very early on in the pandemic efforts as well, because as people know, Taiwan, it performed like the best, actually second best next to that country that discovered the oil during the pandemic. But anyway, in terms of economy during 2020, people say, of course, because you're Confucian robots or something, you all listen to the state, but that's far from the case. We never did any top-down, lockdown, takedown thing. It's all civil society led. So Sandy.
Yeah, so in my MIT hat, we work on helping digital infrastructure in the way that you were asking, for medical, distributed identity. I work with many different countries. And what I see is that Australia,
Yeah.
Indonesia, India.
Yeah, Australia is testing with Japan as we speak, the interoperability. Yeah.
So the real question for me is how, it seems to me that the Indo-Pacific really needs to work together.
Oh yeah, definitely.
The only gap. And one of the biggest elements that the Indian staff, the citizen staff, purpose with identity and also that was being adopted by many countries, it would be really wonderful if there was interoperability between all of them. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, and that's one of the very good use of distributed ledgers. Maybe one of the very, very few. When international jurisdictions, like, for example, Buenos Aires has this Cork ID. So they try it in their city, but not for the entire country. But already on the city level to individual states and so on, they can already carry that kind of selective disclosure, verifiable credentials around. So I think what will happen is not a very multilateral thing, but rather just on those shared trusted systems like Ethereum and so on. It just so happens that one city, one state, one jurisdiction hops on it, and without a bilateral treaty, they just start interoperating, creating value to their citizens. And once that is shown, then I think it would just spread kind of on the meso level. It is to this end that in Taiwan, we asked the parliament, which fast-tracked the amendment to the Digital Signature Act, which used to say that we can only trust foreign certificate authorities if we have a bilateral treaty, which is very difficult to get in Taiwan, by the way. And then we changed it to say, oh, as long as the security standard is the same, it only requires the same technical interoperability in a trust system, which specifically could include, for example, Ethereum.
So demonstrating value is the first step.
That's exactly right, yeah. Showing that, because it's just like network effect. Yeah, if you just have two jurisdictions, well, they don't need a blockchain. But if it's 3, if it's 4, and it's creating a network effect, then interoperability starts to make sense. So, yes.
Sure, at the Boston Global Forum.
Oh, there's the
where
microphone.
We talk about AI and democracy and governance. We often agree that there's a need for accountability.
Of course.
Elizabeth from Africa, I think, mentioned that this morning as well. But we struggle with how to hold bad actors, dictatorship, accountable. So, from your perspective, is AI helpful to hold those bad actors accountable, not just for using AI in negative ways, but how to improve democracy?
That's a great question. Yeah, so the topic that Sandy was just asking has an obvious implication, which is called personhood credentials. So in cybersecurity, for example, when people started camouflage operation or some other kind of operation, the first thing they did is they hide their tracks so that there's no attribution possible after the attack. And if that is not possible, then there's no accountability. You cannot point to which jurisdiction or which team started such attacks on the info or cyber domains. And also, they're often now coordinated through AI, so it's even more difficult. Previously, you can say that there's a 9-to-5 pattern of operation, but now it's all automated. Anyway, so if we deploy personhood credentials, that would mean that, for example, if somebody tried to camouflage online voting, they would have to somehow prove that they are a citizen, a resident of the relevant jurisdiction. And then that is much harder than just registering 10,000 different email accounts or set up fake IP addresses or VPNs and so that. But we need to also be aware that we shouldn't turn authoritarian by countering the authoritarian attacks. So like the real name, real ID system where people just, sign their names on all the online speech, that would just kill whistleblowing, right? So that is also very bad. So the middle ground that we are deploying is called meronyms, partial identities, so that people can prove that they're over 18 years old without disclosing their birthday. They can prove they're a resident or citizen of a jurisdiction without revealing their address. They can prove that they, for example, had a degree in one of those accredited universities without revealing which or which year and so on. And once we have this interoperable meronymic structure, then we can make sure that the voice of the people are actually from the people, and then we don't turn authoritarian as a result, and then it gives democratic accountability for both the actual speech and also the adversaries, the authoritarian regime that try to attack the system, because then they will be like very attributable. Hope that answered your question. There was a hand there, yes?
Yes.
Hello, I'm Paolo Gaudenzi from the Italian Consulate. I think your speech was amazing, and especially what you were saying about against polarization and for democracy. I mean, I think you demonstrated that AI can actually be a tremendous tool to enhance that. So, but in front of us there are big challenges, like in health, in climate and energy, in social issues, strong inequalities growing around the world. So somehow, I think we need sort of collective intelligence, yes, made of very diverse competencies to join together for finding creative solutions.
Yes.
We did an experiment at the Italian Consulate. We gathered something like 100 different experts, very diverse, entrepreneurs, young students, scientists, and so on. And we met them, we allowed them to meet in person to discuss such issues. And in there is the strong problem of different in languages, because everyone comes from his own experience, but this is also a great opportunity, yes, in listening to each other. To your opinion, how AI can favor this meeting of very diverse competencies to create collective intelligence in favor of the solutions for the big challenges that we have?
But that's such a great question. I'm also Senior Research Fellow at the Collective Intelligence Project at CIP.org. And CIP.org has been working with not just the top AI labs such as OpenAI or Anthropic to make sure, for example, the Anthropic Claude systems include the ideas that are set by ordinary people, so that it's not just limited to they have this idea called constitutional AI, which is that AI should behave according to a set of terms of conduct, basically, code of conduct. But the code of conduct, if it's just written by the experts in the AI labs, they often miss many things. For example, when we first run the alignment assembly with the Anthropic people, their original constitution did not even include the provision that some people are not walking, some people are in wheelchairs, wheelchairs, for example. Like people have different modes of mobility. They just assume everybody walks, right? So, I mean, I'm probably not out of malice just because of the lack of diversity and inclusion in the creators. And so after training the Claude models on both the crowdsourced constitution and the original constitution, they found that they're equally capable in terms of capability, but in terms of discrimination, bias, and so on, the collective intelligence one just performs better. And so I think nowadays we are now seeing much more adoption, not just for the top labs, but also the open source communities, the Eleuther AI or Cohere and Hugging Face and so on, so that everybody can run such what we call community models, community alignment. And if you're interested, there's a new field, subfield called pluralistic alignment that talks about this. And the idea, very briefly put, is that there's no such thing as a universally aligned AI system. An AI system only is aligned in a specific social role and when deployed. And it's just like we expect, for example, a facilitator at a meeting. That's a very specific social role, not just on the role of facilitator, but also on the jurisdiction it's operating in and the region and the group of people and so on. So if we're hiring a facilitator, we have a set of social expectations that are sometimes deontological, sometimes virtue, sometimes utilitarian, but all of this should be considered when aligning the AI model and not just one ethics dimension. And previously, the language model had the hardest time reconciling different ethics dimensions, but now there's real mechanistic interpretability advances that will allow this kind of thing to happen. And I think we shouldn't make anything agentic until they can get pluralistically aligned on particular social roles. So if you're interested, welcome to subscribe to the CIP newsletter. We're working on quite a few of these AI advances. Thank you. Sandy?
Yeah, so we're helping consumer reports start with a really simple agentic alignment, which is, don't get ripped off, make sure your data is accounted for and retractable. Things where the moral dimension is not as gray as it is in other places, right?
That's right.
Just to get experience. But then it occurs to us that when we look at all these companies deploying agentic systems for processes, you end up with a network of thousands of very different AIs all working together. Each may be well aligned, but as a network, they may be a disaster.
Exactly.
Just as we saw with social network having these second order effects. Is there any sort of thought about that?
Yes. So I think there's 2 points to be made here. One is that it becomes reinforcing on a superhuman speed only if there's no human in the loop between the nodes of those AI agentic systems, right? So one simple thought really is just to keep it, the interface is non-agentic. Like don't use an agent to connect to agents, basically, because then the complexity is a three-body problem. So that is one design pattern. But a wider design pattern, I think, is that we just need a faster monitoring, incident discovery, as well as this feedback system. Because like for cybersecurity, there is a very strong system of responsible disclosure. And even though that many cybersecurity systems are open source, their interactions create vulnerability that are beyond individual systems. And so this kind of red teaming, penetration testing, responsible disclosure is now becoming an industrial norm so that people can very quickly escalate a incident to a security team, and that goes to the upstream and so on. We do not yet have that for the AI system, especially open source AI systems. I was just in Tokyo talking with the Sakana AI people. Their thesis is that instead of a large system that's very difficult to predict or control, they can just remix several small systems from Hugging Face to one specific role. So instead of having the agents working together, they just merge the agents into one simple, smaller agent. And their idea is that the incidents then are easier to trace upward upstream because it is not interaction, it is kind of model merging. So that is also one thought.
So just a sort of funny note, I ran a discussion for the Club de Madrid for this gentleman here. And the thing that I put forward was very much like that. We need to monitor these things. And the regulators told me I was too Anglo-Saxon. They wanted to have a priori regulation about certain sorts of mixing and use. but of course that doesn't really cure the problem because it's these sort of nonlinear interactions.
Exactly.
So we need to push this notion of having real monitoring,
Yeah.
real sort of easy detection, cure, plan B.
Exactly.
systems
I think the
down.
cybersecurity domain is the domain that is closest, and both for alignment and control, both for safety and trust, right? So we need more participation from the open communities. I think one of the blocking concern was that, like for many things around AI safety and trust, for example, around CSAM detection or things like that, there's not a lot of distributed knowledge. It's aggregated in a few top labs, and everybody just licensed the Microsoft Photo DNA, for example. But there are now efforts going on an open ecosystem, so that, for example, you get a CSAM pictures, but then you use a model, a one-way model, to turn them into descriptions, and it's legal to hold on to the text, if not the image. If we make sure that in the latent space they're close enough, then the people in the open source community can just train on the textual part
Sure.
of the CSAM, and that will make incident reporting much easier, because then it will be processed on the edge, closer to the problem, instead of just gated by the photo DNA team. So that's one very concrete
That's
example.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you for bringing up open, both cybersecurity and open weights. And I'm curious as to your thoughts as to how we can reconcile this tension between the greater security offered by centralization and accessing models through an API and the desire for AI models to be pluralistic, to reflect the values of many. And yet, we have not yet figured out how to build any kind of robust safeguards into powerful models that cannot be trivially removed. None of the security techniques can
Exactly.
yet function without massively degrading
Not
performance.
even watermarking works. Yeah.
And drawing back to your points about polarization, we've begun to see increasing polarization between the security community and the open source community over AI systems, which unfortunately do not behave in a manner that is very similar to traditional open source software. What are your thoughts on how we can reconcile this broader tension, especially given that people are going to pursue both agentic AI and
open source AI. You
and
cannot
general AI
convince each other to
and open
stop.
source
Yeah,
AI.
that's right.
And those seem fundamentally incompatible with security unless we make breakthroughs that we have not yet made. What are your
Yes.
thoughts?
So that is one entire track for the AI Action Summit in Paris next February, the public interest track. My thoughts, I am more of a kind of bridge maker. So the obvious thought is to find out which parts are the non-dual use parts in the existing proprietary systems in the top labs that will benefit from open collaboration. So the CSAM filter that I just talked about is one obvious example. It doesn't really make sense for each different proprietary lab to train their own CSAM filters. If there is a way to legally do so without causing societal harm with the open source society, that's a loss center for them. So obviously they should actually open source it and donate it to the public if there's a legal way to do so, right? And the same for the digital participation infrastructure, the DPI. The collective alignment thing, everybody wants, right? Your product probably doesn't sell if your target economy think you as a colonizer or something. So then the local pluralistic alignment part, at least the part that solicits the CI preferences, that is probably common good. And so a good analogy is that even during the Cold War, the US shared with Russia the safety mechanisms and science about how to handle those uranium or whatever other nuclear procedures, because accidental blow up of nuclear weapons is a global harm, and therefore anything that helps the safety is a global good. And so just last week in San Francisco, we've worked with Mozilla and I think Columbia University with Camille Francois on just iterating exactly which 5 different areas of those non-dual use things are. And so if we can focus the energy from the safety community and the openness community on these bridges, without thinking about their crown jewels, the trade secrets, or things like that, then at least it heals the social layer. I think the social layer at this point is more fragmented after 1047 than the technical layer. We see some technical collaboration that's still ongoing, but the social layer, not so much, right? So we need to fix that. And if that is fixed, if we can get the 5 areas to fruitfully get people contribute, then each incrementing invention, for example, on like machine learning or on making sure that smaller systems, specialized non-agentic ones, can have a safety case that is easily proven, or whatever new things that they're working on, then that can be then added to the non-dual use base. And as that grows, the community, the social layer will heal more. So I think just like the police example I have about Uber, let's maybe defer the conversation about the most divisive issues because there's no technical solution, but there's a lot of lower hanging fruits. Hope that answered your question. Yeah. All right, we have 20 more minutes. Any other thoughts, questions, reflections? Okay, very good. Okay, thank you.